Alright, this video is on ER70S-6, and if you're in the welding world and you don't know what that means, that's not good, alright? So I'm kind of basing this video off of two different situations. One, you just bought a MIG welder and you have no idea what wire to get. And two, you're in the welding world and you don't know what ER70S-6 is. So if you're buying a welder because you want to be able to MIG weld in your garage, you're going to need to put wire in it. The wire you're going to want to get is ER70S-6 most likely, unless you're trying to do flux core or whatever. If you're trying to do wire feed with gas, you need to get ER70S-6. That's the most common wire that's used in the welding field. Now, if you are an experienced welder and you don't know what that means, that's bad. On a scale of 1 to 10 I got written over here, 1 being not that big of a deal, 10 being a really big deal. If you're in the welding world and you don't know that MIG wire is ER70S-6, it's probably like a 7 or an 8. It's a big deal. You need to know what that designation is. So before we get too far into this video, I'm going to actually go over what these numbers and letters mean, right? So if you don't know what that means, that's bad too if you're in the welding world. If you're just a shop welder or a garage welder, just kind of like an amateur type situation, it's not as big of a deal if you don't know what this stuff means. But if you're in the welding world, if you're in a welding program in high school or college or a trade school or wherever, and you don't know what this stuff means, that's bad, all right? So we're going to kind of go over what that means first. So E means electrode. R means rod. 70 is 70,000 pounds per square inch minimal tensile strength, all right? S means solid. So if you were in a flux core situation, that S would be a T for tubular. So it just means it's a solid wire. And then the 6 means the chemical composition of it and what shielding gas you're going to actually run this wire with. This wire is very commonly run with 75-25, 75% argon, 25% CO2 in a short circuit application, all right? So if you're wondering what shielding gas to get, it's going to be 75-25 most likely, unless you get into like a spray transfer or something different like that, but we're not going to get into that right now. Just for regular short circuit, ER70S-6 is the wire you're going to want to use, and 75-25, 75% argon, 25% CO2 is going to be the shielding gas, all right? One thing you gotta look for when you're buying wire is the pounds, right? How many pounds do you get? Now most wire has a hole in the middle of it that's standard, except for this 2-pounder, all right? And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go out to the lab and I'm gonna show you what, I got a 44-pounder out there, that's what we usually use. And then I'll show you what a 2-pound looks like. And if you do use a 2-pound, the hole is smaller, it's like 1 inch. I didn't actually measure it, but it's around 1 inch. And this is bigger, which I'll show you when we go out to the lab. So if you're going to be MIG welding and you're just doing it here and there, you're going to want to get a smaller roll. Because what happens is as that wire sits in the machine, the moisture from the air gets into it and it ends up rusting it, and then you'll have feedability issues. So how big of a roll you want to get depends on what you're doing, right? So there's a number 2-pounder for somebody that's just welding like once or twice a year maybe. 10-pounder for somebody that welds like once a month maybe. And then these two are pretty standard for if you're working in industry, you know, 33 pounds or 44 pounds. I don't know why you'd get a smaller one if you're running a ton of wire, because you're just going to have to change it over, right? So, and they also make one in a barrel. So if you're like on a robotic application and you just don't want to change over wires, you don't want that downtime, there's one in a barrel. I don't know how many pounds it is, but it's big. And it just feeds right through, and yeah, you very rarely have to change it. So those are the pounds you can get it in. Then I kind of look here. Oh, by the way, ER70S-6 is the classification of the wire. It's going to ask you for a classification and specification on the wire on any welding procedure that you're going to run into. The classification is always an E number, if that makes sense, because you're saying an E number and it's actually a letter, but I always refer to it as an E number. That's going to be your classification, and your specification is going to be an A number. So AWS A5.18, that's the specification for ER70S-6 if you're looking for that, if you're writing procedures or whatever. I threw that out there so that you could know what that is. These are the diameters of the wires I wrote right here. Now this, again, if you're welding and you don't know the diameter of the wire, that's bad. That's like a 10 out of 1 to 10, right? I mean, if you don't know what you're running, it's bad, all right? So 023, 030, 035, 045 are the most common diameters of the wire. That is just the diameter of the wire in inches. You see I got the inches symbol right here. People think it's like something other than that. I don't know why, but yeah, it's just the diameter of the wire. If you don't know the diameter of the wire, you're not going to know what contact tip to get. If you're just starting in welding, you're going to want to get a bunch of contact tips as well, because you're probably going to freeze them, all right? So whatever the wire diameter is, you got to get the correct contact tip for that. So usually, if we have a welder and it's got 035, that's what we're using out there right now, is 035. Very common wire, all right? If you need a little bit more metal to go into that joint, whatever you're doing, you're going to want to go to 045, all right? So the most common welding setup, I would say, is 035 diameter wire, ER70S-6 with 75-25, 75% argon, 25% CO2. If that's what you're running, it's probably the most common type of settings that you can get, I guess, or parameters, or whatever you want to call it. So hopefully that explains what ER70S-6 is. If you're just starting out MIG welding, hopefully that gives you the wire to get, the contact tip, and the shielding gas all in one here. And what we're going to do is go out to the lab, and we're going to look at a 44-pound spool, and then I'll pull up a 2-pound spool so you can see the difference in the size of the hole in the center of the actual roll of wire. So let's get out there and we'll get after it. Alright, so here we are with the 44-pound spool, and I highlighted all the relevant information on it, I do believe. You can see 70S-6, AWS A518, and on the bottom left, 035, and then net weight 44 pounds. And now what I'm going to do is zoom out a little bit so you can see about the size of the hole. I'll actually measure it here when I go get the 2-pound one so we get the exact diameter. But it looks like about 2 inches. But that's your standard setup to get started in MIG. So I'll grab a 2-pounder, we'll take a look at that now. So I measured the hole, and it's actually right on the money, 2 inches. And I did find a 10-pounder and a 2-pounder, and it's actually stainless, so that's why it's silver. Because I did forget to mention that ER70S-6 commonly is gold colored because there's a coating of copper on the outside, which helps it keep it from rusting. So it's typically a gold color. I have gotten some in that didn't have the gold, it had some other coating on it, but usually it's a gold coating. So the one on the right is a 10-pound spool, you can kind of see that, that's got the 2-inch hole, and then the one on the left is your 2-pound spool. And I measured that hole, and it was just under 5/8, I do believe. So I'm guessing it's supposed to be a 1/2-inch rod that goes in there. So you got to make sure you have the right size hole in the middle. If you're going to go with a 2-inch, not 2-inch, a 2-pound spool, you got to make sure you have the smaller shaft, I guess. And if you're in school and you don't know what some of this stuff is, don't be afraid to ask your instructor. I feel like some of the more common things, people are always afraid to ask. I always tell people, you know, if you don't know, you don't know. That's what it is. You got to ask questions so you do know, right? So hopefully that clears up what ER70S-6 is and what you're running for a wire when you're doing MIG welding. Thanks for watching and subscribing to TV Weld, and we'll see you next time.